All right, and we're on.
Cool.
Isidora Romantini, thanks for being on Fitness and Consciousness.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
So, I guess I found out about you through the yoga Facebook group.
That's right. Yeah. Yoga
And
movement research. Yeah.
yeah, and that has a lot of instructors in it that have been practicing yoga for a long time, and they're kind of changing their way, and this is after like a lot of experience. And so you're kind of in this group also? You were practicing um, like how yoga is typically practiced over here, and then you were starting to change and do things differently?
Yes, that's correct. Diane Bruni, actually, the woman that began that Facebook group, she was my yoga teacher in my teacher training, and that's how I met her. I did my training through Downward Dog, which is, at the time anyways, was a predominantly Ashtanga yoga studio. And when I started my training there, Diane had just started kind of exploring different ways of doing yoga, and it was actually kind of shunned upon. So that's why I think she left Downward Dog, but that's another story. But yeah, since then, I mean, I started off with a very rigid practice. I was drawn to Ashtanga for that very reason. It was very calculated. It was a set series, and being a type A personality, that was perfect for me. And it required strict discipline. I practiced every day, every morning for at least 90 minutes. But through that, over the years, became injured. I got injured, whether on my own or from having forceful adjustments done on me. So both my shoulders got kind of screwed. My SI joint, I'm still nursing from injuries from years ago. And from that, as we all know, injuries are our best teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So not so long ago, actually, I'd say probably about 3-4 years ago, I started to kind of question what I was doing. I mean, yoga had done a lot for me spiritually, had done a lot for me personally. And it was almost sad when I was really saddened, actually, when I realized that this yoga that I loved so much was actually hurting me. So I started to question everything that I was doing. And that's what, kind of, I mean, through the power of social media, I could see that there were so many of us out there that had been injured from yoga, Diane being one of them. We've all heard the famous pop somewhere in our body while doing yoga. So it was time for me to kind of think about another way of doing it. I still wanted to practice yoga, and I still do practice yoga, but my yoga practice is much different than it used to be.
Yeah, the adjustments are, so I got into yoga. I got my first 2 yoga books at a Grateful Dead concert in like 1994. So I was about 15 years old, and it was like Krishna consciousness stuff. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like asanas and stuff, or it was like, just like meditation, bhakti, karma, and then at my jiu-jitsu class, which I started when I was 18, like our warm-up looked like a lot of yoga stuff. It was traditional Japanese style jiu-jitsu. And then about 5 years ago, I guess, was the first time I actually went to a yoga class. So I did like a lot of yoga stuff, and I was surprised at the adjustments that were like, I mean, I was coming from jiu-jitsu where that's what we do. We torque on each other. We throw each other down. We twist necks. And that stuff in the yoga class would be completely inappropriate at a jiu-jitsu class.
Right.
Is clearly in pain, and you keep going and you keep going. And the teacher's also saying stuff like, just be okay with yourself, just how you are right now. And if you can't do what you did yesterday, it's okay. And then he's like cranking some woman's leg behind her head.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense. It's like he had he like, you don't develop the sensitivity like you would in a jiu-jitsu class. Right after a while, you can feel where before the person even taps or anything. Like, this is as far as I should go.
Mhm.
But in the yoga class, it was just like twerking and twerking, and you'll see people like laid back, like with their ankles behind them, and then the instructor like stepping on their thighs. Just, like, that's probably not a good idea. So, what do you think like started that, like these extreme adjustments, and then like what started it, like this like movement to say, actually, that's not cool. We know better now. Like,
Right.
what's
Well, see, here's the thing about the whole yoga thing. It's, like you said, in class you hear, be at one with your body, you know what's best, all those things where there's this voice of, and there's this teaching of being empowered, yet there's this external force, this person coming in and saying, no, you can go further or farther, and it should look like this. And I think, I don't really know where that has come from. There's these shapes. It's almost like, Cirque du Soleil kind of stuff going on, gymnastics and acrobatics and all these things. And from when I first started, again, in the Ashtanga practice, where it was all about aesthetics. It was about how the pose looked, not how it felt. It didn't matter how it felt, and it didn't matter how much excruciating pain my shoulders or my back was in, or my knees. Didn't matter. It was about how can I get myself into that shape, and I'll do whatever it takes. And if I can't do it, I'm going to rely on my teacher to put me in that position. So standing or lying on top of me in a forward fold, helping me get my foot behind my head, which is like the most asinine thing ever. But, as a student of yoga, especially in the beginning, there was a level of trust that I was putting into my teachers, thinking that they knew better than I did. They had been practicing for 20, 25 years, and they could get themselves by, yanking their own foot around their head. So perhaps they knew more and they knew better. So they're going to make my practice better and stronger by helping me get into those shapes. And that's exactly what it was just getting into shapes and, doing these ridiculous arm balances, contorting my body. And I really think, I can only speak for myself at this point, but I know it was very ego driven for me. And,
ironic, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yes. And, and that's the thing. And that's what we always hear in yoga classes, let your ego go at the door and all that garbage. Right. And no, it was totally ego driven. It was, if I could get into a headstand and then contort my legs in some weird position, then awesome. The more weird it looked, the better. And, who cares if my shoulders are hurting? It's okay. I'll, rub some cream on it, or I'll take an Advil and I'll be fine, and I'll just do it again tomorrow and go further, go even further tomorrow. And it was just like constantly chasing something better and not being good enough in my own body. And I think, again, I can only speak for myself. It was, how can I be better? And what I'm doing right now is not good enough. It was always, this isn't good enough. And if I failed in my practice, which I did every single day, that was the thing. When I was practicing this way, I, in my mind, met failure every single practice. It wasn't the journey that I focused on, it was the destination. And that became really, really toxic, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. I have a history of an eating disorder, and, that feeling of not being good enough. It was ingrained in my cells, and, constantly striving for perfection. And that's what the practice was doing to me. And it was not good. So, I don't know I can't say where this adjusting thing has come from and why it has come to be. It's still happening a lot. You know, here in Toronto, there, I don't want to, I don't want to name drop any studios, but there are, you know, yoga studios out there, and the studio owners and the teachers posting these outrageous adjustments that are quite frankly dangerous, you know, like people standing on, you know, teachers standing on their students' pelvises while they're in wheel. Like, yeah, it boggles my mind. But back then, that was cool. You know, I really looked up to those teachers and I really admired those practitioners, and I was always wishing that I could be that person. Again, coming back to not being fully content with myself. And I think a lot of people, I'm assuming here, this might be rather presumptuous, but a lot of people go to yoga, I know I did, because we're in search of something. We're in search of something more, something better. We want to better ourselves. You know, it's a constant search. And rather than just kind of being content with, you know, what my limitations are now, and, you know, and being okay with that. So.
Maybe you said it, but when did you start? How long ago was it?
I've been practicing yoga for on and off for about 13 years, but more seriously, I'd say for the last 8. Yeah, for about 8 years, I'd say. I got into yoga, unlike yourself, I got into yoga for the physical part of it. That's what led me to yoga first, was the physicality.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine too, because that's, I guess people like enter different ways, and it's like, because it's almost the same thing to me. But so like, was there a moment or like a teacher like that said something to you, like, you know, maybe if your shoulders are always messed up, maybe you should do something different, or maybe like, was there this you said like the pop that it's common to hear? Did you have one of those pops, or was it just like somebody said something, or did it just kind of dawn on you that there's a better way?
Yeah, well, when I had those pops, I still kept practicing the same way that I was doing. It was ridiculous. It actually, I think it happened when I opened my own studio just about 3 years ago. And I opened my studio with the intention of it being a place of healing. And, you know, because we have, you know, massage therapy, we have Chinese medicine, acupuncture, Reiki. We offer a whole bunch of kind of wellness services as well. And we also have a psychotherapist. She's amazing. And so it kind of organically happened where all of a sudden you know, and the thing is too, I'm an RMT as well, a registered massage therapist. So I do a lot of body work, and I've taken courses. I've been doing that for 10 years. And I never really connected. I never really brought the two together, you know, yoga and wellness, for some peculiar reason in my brain, were very separate. And I was seeking therapies and, you know, going to chiropractors and other massage therapists and getting acupuncture done for these injuries that I had. And it was kind of a team effort. I have one of my teachers who works at my studio, Megan. She's a rock star. She suffered a lot of injuries as well from yoga. And it was one of those things where we just started talking more and more about it around the time that I opened up my studio, where it was like, something's not working. This isn't right. You're injured, I'm injured. So if we've injured ourselves, undoubtedly we've injured our students in the past. Like it's had to have happened. And then that's when we started, you know, again, through the power of social media, you know, and doing research and thinking there's got to be a way that we can deliver movement and yoga to people without hurting them. How on earth do we do that? And we just started, you know, I started researching, she started researching, she got into strength training, and that's actually now predominantly what she does. She very rarely practices yoga, and when she does, it's very much her own practice. You know, and so yeah, it's kind of organically happened. It was one of those like very gradual, slow aha moments. It wasn't one of those, you know, the skies opened and the rainbows came out and all that. It was nothing like that. But it was, oh crap, like yoga, this isn't good. This is not serving the modern body. People can't move the way 14-year-old boys move, you know, and that's what yoga originally was designed for, was 14-year-old soldier boys, you know, prepubescent boys. We don't move that way, and North Americans don't move that way. So as we respect yoga and the tradition of yoga, it's now more of a living tradition, and it has to change with the way that the modern body is changing. So it was a tough transition. We had a lot of people coming into our studio trying out our classes and leaving saying this isn't yoga, because they were expecting, you know, warrior 1, warrior 2, and you know, a specific sequence, and we were injecting functional movement, you know, like controlled articular rotations in the joints, and incorporating that into an asana, taking a traditional asana and then sneaking in some strength stuff in there that you wouldn't normally see in a traditional yoga class. So yeah, I mean, it was a tough transition, but we stuck to our guns. It was like, at this point, we can't look back. We can't go back to that because it's hurting people. And we don't do any adjustments in our classes. If we do, it's more of a suggestion. And it's never forced, ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, I think a lot of people may be surprised because they think that they go to their yoga class and they think that it's been passed down for thousands of years from Shiva to these gurus, and it's all this perfect system, and you're getting it, but not really. I mean, yeah, there's been yoga for a long time, but like, what does yoga actually mean? And then, yeah, so people have like stood up and bent over and touched their toes for a long time, or they've sat down and bent forward, or they've like done a lunge or something like that. So these kind of things, I think, do go back a very, very long time. But you touched on like the 14-year-old boys like Iyengar and Joyce learning from Krishnamacharya.
Yes.
And Krishnamacharya was really changed the way from like how it, in the way I understand anyway, from the way it was like more like separate things that you do to like blend it together and faster, more athletic and jumping and more torque, because a lot of it was like trying to, I think, like sell this system. Mm-hmm. And then like if people like think that it's just this one thing passed down, well then why are these two Indians that come from the same school even doing it differently? Mm-hmm. And Iyengar, there was a good documentary, I think it was on Netflix. I have Gaia also, but I think it was Netflix, called like Breath of Fire or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Iyengar even talks about, it's mostly about Krishnamacharya, so it talks about Iyengar and Joyce and how it all worked, and as Krishnamacharya's son in it, like talking about this is how he changed it. No, it didn't happen before then. It was different. But even Iyengar talks about how Krishnamacharya hurt him. I think he snapped his hamstring or something like that. And then he thought, I'm going to do something different because this isn't right. And then so it's just it's just like not quite what it, a lot of people think it is. And so your class, you talk about not doing the extreme adjustment or any adjustments, or more of like the suggestion. So, and these, like more like functional mobility, is that how you said it? Or
yeah,
what does that look like? How would you like start your class and get it ready? And you mentioned like arm balances, are you still doing that kind of stuff? And but like what's it look like?
Well, here's the thing, is that again, yoga traditionally is very linear, you know, very straight up and down angles, and we explore. So basically what our approach is is that there's no movement that's illegal, right? We always hear, for example, in Warrior 2, the knee, I was always taught the knee should never pass the ankle, right? And that's a very common thing. And you still hear it. I know when I go to classes at other studios, I still hear that. Make sure your knee is tracking right over your ankle. Well, who says? Number one, how does that serve you in the real world? When you go up a flight of stairs, next time you go up a flight of stairs, check where your knee is. It will always pass your ankle, right? If you're walking through deep snow, will your knee veer off to the outer edge of the foot? Maybe maybe you lose your balance. Maybe the knee falls in. So who's to say, to prepare yourself for those situations in real life, why not incorporate that into your practice? So why not in Warrior 2 with control, in a controlled environment, where it's safe and where you have some guidance, see what it feels like to let the knee veer in, right? And get a little valgus on the knee. See what that's like. See what it's like to roll to the outer edge of your foot. So people kind of get an idea of what the odd shape might look like, or when your knee is not in that safe 90-degree angle, does it still feel okay? And is it okay to be there? Well, of course it is. Is it okay for your ankle to be in, a little more dorsiflexion? Well, of course it is, because what if you're a grandmother and you want to get down into a squat and play with your grandchild, right? So it's things like that. When you're gardening, what will that look like for you? It really depends on the individual. So a lot of the language that we use in class is, try XYZ out and see how it feels in your body, right? And it's not that it's wrong. It's just, what is your motivation? Why are you doing it? Our students are amazing because they question everything we teach. And we've cultivated that to be able and to be okay with questioning what is being asked of you as a student. What will it feel like if I put my body in this position? Does it feel like crap? Well, okay, I'm not going to do that right now, but maybe it's something that I can explore, again, with controlled movement, so I can build up the muscles around that joint so that in the event that I slip and fall on a patch of ice, I'm able to catch myself and not hurt myself in the process, right? We don't want to be a fear-mongering practice. I think that's, despite the crazy adjustments that torque your body into crazy positions, there's that level of fear-mongering. Like, if you don't have your arms if you don't slide your shoulder blades down when your arms are over your head, you're going to experience some extreme tightness in your upper traps. Well, how is that functional? How is it functional to not let the shoulders come up by the ears? Because that's what kind of happens when you put your arm up, right? So again, it's see what it feels like in your body, and don't be afraid to do something that's out of the ordinary, that's not necessarily linear and perfect. We don't want the practice to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Does that make sense?
That it makes sense. And so are you going like off your mat? They're not like sticking to their, just like being on their mat. They're moving around the place,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Often in our classes, we'll actually roll up the mats entirely, get rid of them entirely, and do a practice on the floor. Because again, that's freeing. You have this 6 foot long mat that's maybe 2.5, 3 feet wide. No, it's like 2 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do in that space? Not much, really, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's interesting for someone who comes to my class or any of our classes, because we're all on the same page. All my teachers are on the same page. Often when someone comes to the studio for the very first time, and if they experience one of those classes where we say roll up the mats or we get off them, there's a level of discomfort. Like, what do you mean roll up the mat? What are we doing? that no, this isn't yoga. Like it's really peculiar. And it's funny because those people that were like that in the beginning, that stuck around and that, that are enjoying this new way of practicing, love it when we roll up our mats and get rid of them now. It's quite freeing. And, and that gives them, almost permission and, to let them know it's okay that you can do yoga in your backyard. You don't need your yoga mat. You can do yoga on the beach. You don't need your yoga mat, So again, it's that level of freedom. And often I find people they're seeking that permission, to be out of the ordinary. And so we kind of give them that, let them know it's okay. You don't have to be in a perfect line. Screw that. Like have fun with it, in a yoga posture, explore and search for lines of tension, and it's really allowing people to get into their bodies. That's what it's done for me. I'm sure when I go to other yoga studios, the teachers look at me like I have 4 heads. I'm sure of it because I kind of do my own thing. I obviously I take the guidance from that teacher because I don't want to be a complete asshole in the class, but I kind of do my own thing. I wiggle around, I feel things out, and that's what we encourage our students to do, is to get in their bodies and connect with themselves rather than just being robots and being told what to do and how to do it,
Are you part of like teacher trainings now?
We are, yeah. I've been doing since we opened the studio. I wrote our own teacher training program, and even since then, in the last 3 years, because things have changed, research has changed. There's things that are updated about the science of the body all the time. So it's even changed from my very first round, which was we're just going into our 3rd round this September. Where we talk a lot about anatomy, biomechanics, biotensegrity. We talk about the fascial lines. There's a big focus on the function of the body. And then we integrate that knowledge into the movement, and really encourage creative freedom as far as, putting a class together. I don't, in our teacher trainings, I don't teach them a set series or a script or anything like that. It's all about their own creative freedom. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to this round that coming up this September. It's going to be freaking amazing.
Yeah, I bet it is. What about getting it accredited? Like, or does that even matter anymore? Or what's like?
Yeah,
What
there's
about
a lot of discussion. Yeah, they're like the Canadian, the Yoga Alliance and all that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. We are registered with the Canadian Yoga Alliance. There's a lot of discussion about how it's a cash grab, and that it's not a good thing to be part of be part of any yoga alliance. The thing is, with yoga, there's not a governing body, right? And so to be part of this yoga alliance, whether it's the American one or Canadian one, you have to pay a fee to be on their roster. I did it initially, I'll be honest about it, I did it as a business decision. Because they don't police anything. They don't check up on me. They don't check up on anybody, really, as far as yoga schools are concerned. And that's where the problem lies. I have strict confidence in our teachings and the teacher training, that it's good, that it's of very high value, as compared to other trainings out there. Just because I've seen the product of, I've had a lot of people come in asking to teach at our studios that have taken teacher trainings at other studios, and it's very cookie cutter. It's very much the same. It's just, about the asanas and and the philosophy, and not really, these people don't really know much about how the body functions. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to be taking the responsibility of, taking people through movement, you better know, generally, I mean, there's only so much you can do in 200 hours. You better know something about the body. And I know for a fact that, first of all, the requirements, the amount of hours that are required from the Yoga Alliance for anatomy and biomechanics is very, very minimal. Most of the hours are dedicated to asanas and sequencing. And I don't think that's a responsible move, to just, again, take people through shapes and not understand how to prep the body for those certain shapes. I mean, it's not to say that you can't do those shapes and you can't do those yoga shapes, but are you preparing the joints properly? And that's really, really important. And so, again, going back to being part of the Alliance, it was purely a business decision. Am I getting people enrolled because of the Alliance? Not really. So that's something that that I've been playing with, because we're still a young studio, a young company. I'll probably stay with them for a tiny bit longer, but I'm not relying on them. If that's what you're asking, it's not, because again, they're not checking in, they're not policing, they're not saying what I should and shouldn't teach. They have a guideline of how many hours you should, again, dedicate to certain parts of the teacher training. But even that, for our teacher training, it's very different than what they recommend. I throw in way more hours, again, into the science of it, because I'm a nerd. I love that stuff. And so I'm going to teach it. And that's basically the short end of it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting from. There was a time I was planning on getting certified to teach yoga, and then I kind of was like, well, I was going to do this 500-hour training, and under this teacher, it was going to take over 1,000 hours to do it. And at first I was like, okay, well, that's good because he's so thorough and he teaches Sanskrit and all this stuff. And then I kind of started learning more about him, and I was going like 2 or 3 classes a day sometimes, and trying to like rack up my hours and going to my Ayurveda classes and all this stuff. And then I kind of started realizing maybe he's not as good as I thought at first, because he is torquing these people's joints around and doing stuff that just doesn't make sense. And then it turned out he was like doing some creepy stuff in his body work room and stuff. It was, so I quit going there. But I was thinking, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to end up overhauling the whole system because I don't like this. There's too much of that. There's not enough of this. And then I decided, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And so I have a kettlebell training certification, but I still teach people about barbells and movement and animal stuff. So it's like, so I was just wondering, like with the Yoga Alliance, which seems like they're just there to cash your check for the most part, does that even matter? Can you still call it a yoga studio? Can you still call yourself a yoga teacher, even though maybe you didn't go through some accredited thing, but it's like, oh, okay, I know at this school, this teacher is really good. She has a good reputation, like your school, and she's doing something different. So then, like, you're certifying them in, you can call it yoga, but it doesn't mean somebody else that's above you in some way is going to maybe like call it yoga. So it just seems to me like there's like the times are changing, that like some of these systems or whatever, like the Yoga Alliance or these different certifications for trainers or whatever, maybe like they're not really needed anymore. Like they're needed, but they're like, it just seems like it's just a different era now. And
Yeah.
like with like some trainers will have 10 different certifications, and I have somebody coming on. I'm looking forward to hers Monday. She has a bunch of different certifications, and so that was like one of the things I was wanting to talk about is like why all these different ones, and it should be really interesting. But so when you have like the new students coming in, like are they coming to you because they've been hurt somewhere else, and they're like, they hear about you, or they find you in some way, like, here's this class that actually makes sense. It doesn't claim to be some ancient tradition. It claims to be a modern method.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting that too, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're at the point now where kind of, word has spread, and because people, it's interesting because people are just feeling better. They're coming to class and they actually feel good when they leave, and that's huge. Mm-hmm. Because usually, with a yoga class, a traditional yoga class, you feel good while you're in it, kind of, sort of. But then you feel like garbage afterwards. You feel like, oh man, okay, I twisted too much. Maybe I shouldn't have put my hand behind my back. Maybe I shouldn't have done that bind. And you feel it the next day. I know I always did. And we hear those stories from our new students and students that have kind of, become a part of our family, where they're starting to feel good. Those aches and pains that they had before are slowly starting to go away, and they actually give us credit for that, which is really, really cool, because they're taking the power on themselves to heal themselves, and that's huge, right? They're coming to us because they want to move better, and people's goals. I mean, again, for our studio, it's very interesting, actually. When I first opened the studio, I thought I had a completely different idea of what our demographic would be. And it's really, really cool that the demographic that I thought we would have, which is about, maybe between 25 and 35 years old, our demographic, actually, the big chunk of our clientele, I'd say, is like between 40 and 65. Because these are people who want to move better longer, right? They want a sustainable practice. And, that's what my goal is now that, I'm going to be 45 soon. I want to be able, my goal is when I'm 90, I want to be able to tie my own shoes. If I live that long, I want to be able to dress myself, right? So the word is spreading that this is the kind of practice that we provide. A sustainable practice where you can feel strong in your body and carry it with you. I had a student a couple weeks ago pull me aside after class, and she said, I was thinking about you all weekend while I was painting my shed and gardening and mowing my lawn. She's like, all I could do is hear your voice in the background about how to feel my feet. She's like, I mowed my lawn in my bare feet. I've never done that before. Like, this is really cool stuff when people are being feeling an impact of the stuff that we're teaching. Because it's just that they can take what they're learning in the studio and they can take it into their real life. And I mean, that's gold. There's nothing that speaks volumes, and it holds so much value, right? So yeah, it's word of mouth. It's getting ourselves out there, being recognized by the stuff that we're doing. That's the stuff that I post on Instagram every week. It's giving snippets of the kind of stuff that we do in class, the kind of stuff that we teach in our teacher trainings, so that people get, an idea of what we're about. It's not just posting pictures of, one of us on a beach doing a stupid yoga pose. Like, it's just, that sounds really, really crass, but that's basically what it is. It's like, this is what we're about, right? We want to get you moving and feeling better. And yeah, it's a modern method. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think like people's idea of what yoga should be, like these sequence or these different poses that they see in the magazines and look this way, and then you're doing something different that maybe you got it from Ido Portal or something,
right?
And then, well, that's not yoga, that's something different. But then people realize, oh, that actually is the yoga. It actually does follow the principles. and doesn't have to be this stuff that's in this book. It can be, these new things, and it can still be yoga, and maybe it's even more yoga than going to where that some guy is cranking your foot behind your head.
Yeah.
And so,
well, see, yeah, and that's the thing too, is that I was actually having a discussion with one of my teachers. We chat all the time. We're constantly using our brains and challenging each other. But we were talking about that, about, when we do get, it doesn't happen very often anymore, actually, but occasionally we will get someone come in and leave and say that that's not yoga. But the fact is, it's more yoga than yoga. Mm-hmm. Because it requires so much attention and focus to how you're feeling, how you're feeling in your physical body, how it may be triggering an emotional response, right? It's feeling the gentle tugs underneath the skin through the fascia. Like it is so much about connection when you're moving mindfully rather than just going through a sequence like a robot. It's, and we've heard, the occasional comment like, well, when I come to yoga, I don't want to think, and I want to turn off my brain. I just want to be led through a sequence. Well, then you're not not in the right place. Like, that's not what we do. We make you think, and you're so connected to how you're feeling in that moment, in the present, that whatever's going on outside of the studio, it's on hold. Yeah. Your brain, from the stresses, from the demands of life, get put on hold because we're asking you to tune in, to really tune in. And that, my friends, is more yoga than anything else as far as I'm concerned. And that's good stuff.
Yeah, what kind of, I couldn't agree more with that. It's just amazing, like what kind of like people will latch onto, and they have this idea in their mind, and they don't see other moves as like fit into what's in yoga. But like, so what kind of like strength techniques are you adding in to your?
Yeah. Well, one thing that we're really big on is blanket work. So we do a lot of sliding, we do a lot of body surfing and pulling, because typically in yoga, pulling doesn't exist. It's all pushing, right? It's all plank stuff. It's all done, everything's done in the hands, where there's no attention brought to the lats, really. Like there's no pulling action. So we do a lot of pulling ourselves across the floor. We do, lunges with blankets. So we do a lot of sliding, because you kind of have to control that movement. Otherwise you would do things like the splits, right? So, and kind of fall into the splits. So we do stuff like that. We do a lot of grip work. What else? We actually have a yoga with weights class that we do as well. So we've brought weights. We've been doing that now for just over a year. So we brought weights into the yoga room. I believe we're the only ones that are doing it. The closest place that's doing yoga with weights is maybe an hour and a half away from us. So no one's really doing that, because again, people don't think that weights belong in the yoga room. Well, we disagree. So we're able to, and it's not heavy weights, but we have light kettlebells. We have, just 2.5, 5 pound weights, nothing crazy. Because again, it's about it's controlling that movement. So we're not throwing weights around. So we incorporate, that strength training into the yoga practice. And again, we're seeing people heal themselves. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I bet. And you're also doing acupuncture, and there's other stuff there. Because I was just like looking through your. I've been aware of you for I don't know how long now. It's been a long time, but I was just kind of like skimming through some stuff, kind of getting ready for this, and it said something like modern acupuncture or something.
Yes.
So can you explain what? I forget how it was worded exactly, but it was something like that.
Yes.
Can you explain like what that is and what is modern about it and what's
Right.
left out or added or?
Mm-hmm. So what I think you're referring to is the contemporary medical acupuncture.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a traditional acupuncturist, Margaret, who is great for systemic issues like, digestion, insomnia, anxiety, allergies, things like that. What I do specifically, and I've been doing it for as long as I've been doing massage therapy. I got my education in that very shortly after I finished massage therapy school, because it works. The contemporary approach is using acupuncture directly to the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system. So for someone who has an injury, for example, I mean, after doing an assessment, I'll decide how I'm going to treat them. But it's working directly with the nervous system and the musculoskeletal system rather than meridians. So the traditional acupuncture works with the meridians in your chi and your energy systems, whereas the contemporary approach is more mechanical, if that makes sense. So, for example, a rotator cuff, which is very common, a rotator cuff injury, I will treat the nerves that supply the shoulder, so the brachial plexus, for example, and then I'll also treat the joint itself with the needles. So the traditional acupuncture, the needles basically just go just underneath the surface of the skin, whereas the contemporary approach, I go directly to where the problem is. So the needles go relatively deep, totally painless still. But again, it's a more direct approach. Basically, the way I look at it and the way I explain it to my patients is the needles act as extensions of my fingers. The needles get to the places that I physically can't get to, no matter how hard I'm digging my knuckles or my elbows in you, the needles will get beyond that. So with that, the benefits of that, it's a double whammy actually, because you can either, with the needles, I can either relax an area. So if the muscle is, for example, over firing and overexcited and spasming, I can relax and deflate that muscle. Or if a muscle is lacking neural drive, I can stimulate the nerve supplying that muscle and get it working better again. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah. So I kind of like go back and forth with like whether I believe in meridians or not.
Right.
I believe in nerves. I know that's, I'm pretty confident in that. There could be, but so you're not even, so if you're doing like contemporary, do you even worry about like learning the traditional points, or is it just a completely different system? You're just using the same tool. And are there, is like one point really close to the other, but like instead of putting it here, you're putting it here or something like that? Is it
Gotcha.
like you're like almost, I guess I'm saying like the old book was close. We're using a different language now. They're actually like about a quarter of an inch off or something like that, or is it just a completely different?
Gotcha. Okay, so clinically, so if I'm speaking to another practitioner, whether it be an acupuncturist or someone who provides acupuncture, we use the names of the meridian points as reference, right? For my contemporary approach. So I'll use it as reference, but it's not as specific, like you said, as the traditional acupuncture. I'm thinking more about feeling. I feel where I put the needles. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I rely a lot on my palpation skills and my assessment skills. That's my huge reliance right there. And watching and observing the behavior of the tissue in that person when they're moving. So when they're showing me an active range of motion, I'm observing how the tissue is behaving. So that's another thing that I use, and how I determine how I'm going to treat somebody. I can't speak for traditional acupuncturists because I'm not one, but I assume that theirs is very specific. I know that I get treated by our traditional acupuncturist for my allergies, and I know just by observing how she works, she's very, very specific on where she puts the needles. I'm specific as well, but in a different approach. Again, it's more mechanical. So it's clinically we'll refer to the meridian points, but I'm not as, like if you read the literature and the education behind acupuncture, they use things like 2 finger breaths, things like that. Like it is very, very specific. I'm not, it's more mechanical, and it's more based on observation for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you're saying that, so you're the contemporary going into like those particular things, maybe not so good. They're just good at different things. So somebody comes in, they have like the digestive thing. Oh, that your partner is better. And then they come in for a more mechanical thing, then your way is better. So it's like a complementary system.
Absolutely.
It doesn't replace. It's not a better version of the other one. It's a whole different thing.
It's completely different. The approach is different. Everything is different. Again, like you said, same tools, just different approach.
So like when people are coming to you and they have, because you say you do massage also, and then do you say like, oh, actually, can we do some acupuncture? So they schedule just the massage, and you're like, actually, I think a little acupuncture here would be better. So are people getting like both things at once from you? Is that kind of
Yeah. So through my 10 years of practicing, I've kind of taken different modalities. So I have quite a hefty toolbox of things that I use on my patients. So everyone is different, right? There are some people that are absolutely terrified of needles. So me even suggesting that would have them running. But I also do things like cupping, and there's various massage, or it's not even massage, because when I think of massage, I think spa and just feeling good. It's soft tissue work. So, most of my appointments, though, I'd say 90% of the people that I see, I will do acupuncture, just because, again, the needles act as extensions of my fingers and get to places that I simply can't get to. And I'd rather do that first and then do the soft tissue work, because then the hard part's done. All that deep work that would have taken me forever to get to with just my bare hands is done in a matter of 12, 15 minutes with the needles. And then I can really, do some effective work, some soft tissue work with my hands. So it kind of saves both of us. It saves my hands and my body from burning out, and it saves my patient from experiencing that deep tissue, excruciating, painful work that would have been done otherwise. So it kind of, and the healing process is much quicker. The response, the nervous system responding to the acupuncture is quite quick, and it lasts. But I would never, I never ever force acupuncture on my patients. It's always kind of like a decision between the two of us. What's going to work? Like, I think this is what's going to work for you. I think the acupuncture would be great for this situation. But if you're not up for it, we'll do it another way. The process may take a little longer than it would if I combined the modalities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I've heard of it like that before. going like specifically for the muscle and the nerve, and I don't think that I was aware of
Hmm.
that system, because I had acupuncture done once, and it was a gift from my girlfriend at that time, and I was like, I really wanted to like it, and I couldn't. I didn't really go in there with much of a problem. I mean, I have this like shoulder thing, like I can like pull my shoulder up. I can feel like the scapula kind of like popping a little bit, like so I kind of like I do that kind of all the time. And I'm always trying to like keep that. So like I told him about that, and he did like some cupping and then the acupuncture, and I was like wanting to like it, but I was like, I can't really honestly say that I felt anything from it.
Right.
And I was hoping to, because I practiced a lot of qigong and martial arts, so I think well, I know I can feel like my microcosmic orbit, so I can feel that, but I couldn't really say that I can feel like my meridians. I
Right.
can't really honestly say that the microcosmic orbit, I can feel it, I can use it for different things, but
Yeah.
I can't actually feel meridians, but I think some people might be able to. I think there was someone, I think it was in the yoga group that we're in. I think she was blind,
Hmm.
and she was talking about feeling so I'm not going to say somebody else can't, or that
Right.
she's making stuff up, but she's blind. And she said like she could reverse the direction. And did you
Wow.
do that one? Do you know what I'm talking about? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard all kinds of things happen with acupuncture. I've never experienced that myself. I know with certain points when Margaret needles me in certain areas, I feel more relaxed. And I mean, who knows? I mean, it could be just the fact that I'm lying down and chilling out. I know that, she also does it for my husband who has asthma. And since he's been getting acupuncture with her, he hasn't had to use his puffer. So again, whether it's placebo, and that can go for anything. I mean, I would never want to poo-poo any kind of practice, because you know what? Honestly, if it works for you, awesome. You know, from the approach that I take, I see and people feel a noticeable difference mechanically, functionally in their bodies when they're done. But hey, it could be placebo as well. Who knows, right? Like it's because there aren't any real scientific studies that have been done proving it to work. So, I mean, I see evidence of it working, but I've also had patients come in and say, I've had that kind of acupuncture before. It doesn't work for me. I've never gotten relief from it. Okay, cool. That's fine. But that's with anything. For some people, one thing works, but not for the person beside them. So you have to respect that, right?
Yeah, some people swear by it, and they'll say they get the acupuncture in one spot, and they'll feel it in another, and they can
Sure.
feel the line, and they can. I had one of my clients was one of my older clients. She is a medical doctor,
Mhm.
and she would go to the acupuncture, and so I was like, "Can you explain how it works?" And she's like, "Nope."
Nope.
She did say and she did, but she would go 'cause she said that it helped. She said that there were studies done where it does help with like pain management and stuff like that, but she had no way of really explaining it with her education. But
Right.
she could feel it, and she would go. And when I would like read about it, because I thought about I've read a bunch on acupuncture and meridians too, but there it was like some of the old books would say some like the um, the acupuncturist is not just putting a needle in you and then it works, but they're transmitting their chi into you.
Right. I've heard that
So
too.
so um, there's interesting things like that, like the Reiki. It seems like it could be just a bunch of baloney, but then people can like feel stuff. I feel my leg heating up, or I can. But if people can actually like project their chi into or through the needle, then maybe that's like the difference with some. And like, do you like try to do that at all? Like project your,
No.
you're just on you're using a completely different system with different rules.
Well, here's the thing. I don't want to screw around with people's energy, right? Like let's face it. I mean, again, whether it's, scientific or not, we all know when someone who has really shitty energy who enters the room and all of a sudden the whole mood of the room changes. We've all experienced that, right? Or vice versa, when the energy in the room is kind of like meh, and then someone comes in that's bright, and again, the mood changes in the room, right? So we can't deny that there's something with energy, right? So if I were, my dog is misbehaving. So I don't want to screw around with people's energy. So, and including my own. So, I don't want to project anything onto anyone. I don't want anything projected onto me. That whole transference, we learn about it in massage therapy school, and we study it a lot, actually, because I'm constantly touching people. I have to be careful. And I've actually experienced, again, talking about feeling things, I've actually experienced transference from a patient where I felt sick for days afterwards. So that stuff is very real as far as I'm concerned, because I've felt that. And again, and it's the same thing, like when you're with somebody who's like a Debbie Downer and negative, you feel kind of negative after spending time with that person, right? So I think that stuff is very real. So as far as me thinking about projecting good energy, healing energy, that kind of stuff, I don't want to go there. I'm not trained in it. I don't think I ever want to be, because I think that's a heavy burden to carry. And I just don't want to play around with that stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I think sometimes people will think, okay, like yoga teacher, acupuncture, they start going to like these more like spiritual things that might be just pretend. And so when like you're talking about the 200-hour yoga teacher training, and then all of a sudden the person's a psychologist, and they know about all the energy, and they have like they can deal with all these things that they're really not, they have no right to do. And you're like the energy thing, like the same girlfriend that got me that acupuncture, she was a yoga teacher and a massage therapist also. And she would say that like there were sometimes like she would have to like go out and like kind of like ground herself, because she could like take on their, like if they had a headache, maybe she'd start to get a headache, or they're starting to have so she would like go out and like put her hands in the ground. She'd go out and sit in the grass, and was able to like, and I guess it's like a thing. It's a real thing. So do you have a way, like do you do the same thing? Do you just go like walk around barefoot in the yard or something like that after to?
It's a combination. It's a combination of things. While I'm in it, because in a day of work for me, it will be a combination of me, most of the day being at the studio, and within that, tending to the business, seeing patients, and teaching classes. So I don't sometimes get a chance to go outside and put my feet in the grass. And if it's snowing, there's no freaking way I'm doing that. So,
You're in.
right. So what I often do, and I found that really it helps, again, whether it's psychological or not, I don't know, but it works for me. I actually flick the energy off. Like it's like flicking water, or just, that's what I do. I kind of shake it off, or I'll brush it off my body kind of thing. And I'll visualize all that kind of junk, any junk that I may have absorbed from someone, I visualize it leaving my body. That works for me. Again, whether it's placebo and it's all in my head, I don't know, but it works for me. I have been told by many teachers to, touch a natural object like wood or earth or same thing. But I think if anything, that sense of grounding, I think it may just be that pause that kind of gets us back into ourselves. So again, whether it's that connection to the earth, we don't know. We don't know. But again, if it works for you, then awesome. That's, so yeah, that flicking thing works for me. So even when I'm teaching, if I'm teaching a class and I do happen to touch somebody, as soon as my hand comes off, I flick. It's become automatic now. So, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I could kind of like dig more and more all the time into what you're doing, but I guess we've been at it for like a hour here.
Gee.
Would you, is there, yeah, it goes really fast. I mean, I'm not in a hurry. I have another one planned, but that's not for like an hour and a half. Is there anything else you're wanting to get into, or?
I think we covered most of what we could today. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It was really cool. And so we can start to just wrap it up then. Is there, how do people find you, what you're doing? And
okay, so my studio, the website is www.stouffvilleyogalife.com. We have an email, info@stouffvilleyogalife.com. I'm on Instagram as Isidora_Romantini_RMT. And we're on Facebook too. So I have my own Facebook page, Isidora Romantini, and we have a Stouffville Yoga Life Facebook page as well. And they're all connected. So whatever I post on Instagram, you'll see on Facebook. And yeah. And anything that's on Instagram is also linked to our webpage as well. So everything's connected. You won't miss a thing. And we also have a YouTube channel, Stouffville Yoga Life.
Very cool. Is there any like final thoughts you want to leave everyone with?
I like to always leave it with always ask why with everything.
Yeah, that's a good rule to live by.
Yeah, it's simple, but it's complex at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thanks again for being on. I'll stop the recording. I'll talk to you for just a second when we're done.
All right, cool. Thanks, Ryan.